So today should hopefully be an algebra review for most of you. I just need to show you how to solve a very specific type of equation that we'll need for the rest of this unit. When we get into these things called similar figures, probably the best way to describe it would be if you were to take a sheet of paper and put it down in a photocopier and reduce the size on it when you make a copy. If you weren't aware of that, you can actually do that. You can take a document or whatever, put it down in the copy machine, and then set it to scale down to say 50% or 25% or whatever to shrink it down. That's kind of the big overall idea with similar figures. You take this triangle or square, rectangle, whatever, and you shrink it down to a smaller version of itself. When you do that, the math that you're going to have to do, it falls down into what's called a ratio and then solving a ratio equation, which is called a proportion. The vocabulary of that you don't particularly need to know. I just need you to know how to solve a proportion. And again, like I said, that's kind of the whole point of today. So a ratio, you've actually done ratios probably since about third grade when you've reduced a fraction, right? A ratio is just a fraction that shows how two separate quantities are kind of related. So if I had this ratio 6/8, what most of you can probably do without too much effort is reduce that down to a simpler fraction, which would be 3/4. Now, when you take one ratio and set it equal to another ratio, that's created what's called a proportion. So let's say I were to leave one of these values out and replace it with a variable and ask you to solve for that variable. That's where the solving a proportion is going to come into play, which those are actually really easy to solve if you can do just some basic arithmetic. Excuse me. So we'll just kind of jump in this. What you're going to do is cross multiply the numerators and the denominators of the fraction. So I'm going to go back to this previous example real quick just because it's already set up, and we know that the answer should be x equals 3 because that's what we started out as, 6/8 equals 3/4, but then kind of solving it. When you cross multiply these, right, and I mean literally, you're going to make an x cross multiplying these. I'm going to multiply 8 and x to get half of my equation. I'm going to multiply 6 and 4 to get the other half of my equation. And what you should wind up with, if you've had me for algebra, is an equation you were solving literally the first day of school. I mean, these are going to be very straightforward equations to solve. So divide by 8, and you got a value of 3, which, like I said, we already knew. So the reason I did that one is so you could kind of see the mechanics of it, knowing what the answer is going to be. A lot of these, you're not going to be able to look at them and say, oh, the answer is 3. You're going to have to do a little bit of work. So that being said, it's the same idea. We're going to cross multiply these. One side, 8 times x, is going to be my variable expression, and then 4 times 10 is going to be the other side being 40. So when you divide, you get 5. Okay, those are pretty basic. Just a single step after you've multiplied. These next two are a little bit more complex. Again, they're not super hard. What you're going to have to do is kind of think a little bit on these when you multiply. When you multiply 4 times this denominator, x minus 3, you need to treat that x minus 3 as if it's in a set of parentheses. And then 6 times 8 is 48. You will have to do one extra step here where you have to distribute your 4 in to get 4x minus 12. Now, if you're comfortable enough with it, you can kind of distribute as you're setting it up. You have 4 times x minus 3, so multiply each part by 4 and kind of jump straight down to this part right here. That's up to you. So adding 12, that's going to give me 4x equals 60. So then x has to be 15 when I divide by 4. Okay. All right, last one here. Again, you're going to have to treat this as distribution. So 4 times x plus 8, and then 7 times 9, 63. I said 9 and wrote 9. 7 times 9, 63. So again, when you distribute here, 4x plus 32 equals 63. 4x equals 60. Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I'm thinking and writing at the same time. It's not working for me. 31. So then when you divide, you get, and this is okay, you're going to get a decimal. You can leave these as fractions. I would prefer decimals, but if you leave them as fractions, that's okay too. Probably for the majority of your homeworks, it's going to be better to give them as a decimal. If you round it to the nearest tenth. If it's a terminating one like this, you can kind of leave it like that. You know what? Let's just kind of set up a standard of, hey, let's round these to the nearest tenth. So we'll call this 7.8. Okay, you get a decimal, round it to the nearest tenth. I really don't care what it is after that. Okay, take your time on these. You're going to be doing proportions pretty much from this day forward through the rest of this unit. So make sure you can do these.